75, and then Ramananda Maharaj at that time, he was Prabhupada's secretary, so he'd been with Prabhupada for about 7 or 8 months in 1975, but he was also the GBC for the whole of Africa, but he was struggling, so there was some disturbance was there. So when Prabhupada went and he saw the situation himself, then he told Ramananda, now you have to stay here, I'll get somebody else to be my secretary and get the answer in Africa sorted out. So he did that. In the meantime, there was another ex-servant, Nandika. He actually, the first time I saw Prabhupada in Sydney in 72, he was on Prabhupada's party. So again, in 75, he was in India, but he was kind of just, he wasn't really in a fixed program. He was doing some business, buying and selling Ayurvedic medicines. So when Prabhupada saw what was going on in Africa, he told Upendra and Balimaran, Bali wasn't there that time. He told Upendra, Nitai Das was also there, but he had visa problems, so he couldn't stay in Delhi when Prabhupada was there. He had to come down to Bombay. Anyway, for various reasons, there were 3 or 4 devotees who had previously served Prabhupada, who were in India, but not available. So when Prabhupada came up from Bombay to Delhi, this was November 25th, 1975, then he had one secretary, that was Hansadutta, who'd just flown in from Europe to be Prabhupada's secretary for 1 month. He had Harikesh, who was cooking and transcribing Prabhupada's Bhagavatam translations on the tape. That was pretty well it. So out of those 4 possibilities, none of them were actually available to take up their own service of giving Prabhupada his massage and looking after him during the day. So I just happened to come to Delhi on some private business for the one day when Prabhupada first arrived, November 25th. And Gopal Krishna Maharaj, he was a relatively new GBC there. Carry also didn't take the sannyas till later on, but he was doing his best to try to get everything up and running in Delhi, and especially Prabhupada had told him that he especially wanted him to concentrate on getting his books translated into Hindi and then have big distribution as they were doing in the West. So Prabhupada spent about 4 or 5 days in Delhi at that time. As I say, I'd come there for 1 day on the 25th of it. Prabhupada didn't have somebody to do his massage. So I had been asked by Gopal Krishna so, what was I saying? All right. When Prabhupada arrived in Delhi, at that time the temple was in Toddamal Lane, which was a very short street. It's not very far from Connaught Circus and that area there. So our temple was about maybe half the size of this room. A very small place. And there were hardly any devotees. Tribhuvanath Prabhu was there. He was a brahmachari from England. Tejas Prabhu was he was the temple president. And Prabhupada had told him especially stay in Delhi and make life members from all the MPs, all the politicians, could just go around and solicit them. So he was doing that. And I think we had one Indian boy, I forget his name, he was doing a bit of cooking. Harry Cash was cooking for Prabhupada, of course. So anyway, nobody was available to do the massage at that time. So Prabhupada had seen me sitting outside his door. Gopal Krishna Maharaji had asked me, don't go back to Vrindavan for a few days until Prabhupada does. So they were waiting to see a fellow called Gulzarilal Nanda. I don't know whether any of you remember him. He was a member of the first independent government in India when the British quit. He was one of the first people get into the politics of that. And then gradually he retired, and he got a grant of about $1.5 million, which he was going to do some work in Kurukshetra. So he had an idea about improving the facilities there. And at the beginning of 1975, and then with the installation of Krishna Balaram and the opening of the temple there, after Krishna Balaram were installed, Prabhupada left Vrindavan to go and see Gulzarilal Nanda. He had organized some kind of conference, all sadhus and different personalities were there, and he explained his program. He wanted to develop Kurukshetra. So he invited Prabhupada to come. So at that time, Prabhupada did go there immediately after the opening of Krishna Balaram Mandir, but he already had his world tour planned, so he couldn't stay there. So he went for one day, and then he had arranged to meet with Nanda towards the end of the year in November. So now, in November, when Prabhupada came up to Delhi, it was with the purpose of meeting with Gulzarilal Nanda and then going with him to Kurukshetra to check out all the new facilities and things that they were doing there. So Prabhupada was interested in that, and that was why he came to Delhi in November 75. So, as I said, the other servants somehow or another got sent to Africa or other places. Upendra actually was on his way to Fiji. So Prabhupada needed somebody to give him his massage every day. And with Gopal Krishna Maharaj, he had asked me that since you're here in Delhi, I was in the middle of cleaning the temple in Vrindavan when we got the word that Prabhupada was coming. And Brahmananda, he was Prabhupada's secretary, he happened to have a new volume of Chaitanya Charitamrita with the Gundicha Marjana, that, narration. So he let me borrow the book, and I read it. I was the temple commander, so I was very interested to see about the cleansing of the Gundicha temple. And I read through that, and I got really inspired. So after Prabhupada left at Janmashtami time to go on his travels, we decided to clean the whole temple in just the same way that they were doing in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time. So we were very busy cleaning up, and Prabhupada came and went for Janmashtami period, and then at the end of November, or late November, he came back. So Gopal Krishna Maharaj told me, don't go back to Vrindavan right now. We can finish off the cleaning, after Prabhupada's visit. But stay here. You can sit at the door. I need somebody to guard Srila Prabhupada. So at the time I thought, this is India, it's not like America or something where everybody's got a gun or whatever. But I thought Fiji. And when Prabhupada came back in late November then, Upendra was just tour to Fiji. So it was a bit of a question that who could do Prabhupada's massage. So Prabhupada had seen me outside the door, guarding it or whatever. And so he told Hari Kesh, what about, this Australian boy? So Hari Kesh did his best to try to dissuade Prabhupada from, taking me onto the party, because during his visit in Janmashtami time, I had a little conflict with one young man that had come to see the temple, and it ended with, this fellow being tossed out the temple by me. As the temple commander, and he got a little bit of a bloody nose. And, so Prabhupada, it was reported to Prabhupada, and he sent for me, and I got in a little bother with this young man. He was a Bengali boy actually, but he was just kind of doing his own touring. He had a French girlfriend, and they happened to come to the temple. Anyway, we had an argument, and it resulted in him getting a little, dusted down, as we say. So for me. And I thought, oh, this can't be good. Prabhupada doesn't know me, so, somebody must have said something about the day before's altercation. And so when I went into Prabhupada's room, he looked at me, and he was very quiet, very sober. I was completely on the edge. And Prabhupada asked me what had happened. So I explained as closely as I could how I got into this altercation with this boy. So then Prabhupada, at the end of it, he said, you have committed a great offense. This boy's going to go back into Vrindavan. He'll tell all the people there that the Western devotees beat him up. And it'll cause us, we had already had some incidents of the locals, kind of throwing stones at the devotees and generally giving us a hard time. So Prabhupada said, now you have to go and find this boy, bring him to the temple, invite him back and apologize. So I did it anyway. But I went out for one day, I couldn't find him. The next day, Prabhupada asked me in the afternoon, it was in the middle of the darshan, he sent for me. And I came in the room, and there was about 50 people visiting. And Prabhupada saw me coming in his darshan room, and he waved me over. So I went over. Prabhupada said something to me, and I couldn't understand what he was saying. I mean, sometimes it happened, other devotees I spoke to, they had a similar experience, that they were so nervous about getting in front of Prabhupada and talking with him, that they actually, their brains, like your brain freezes, and you don't know what he's saying or what he wants, and you're desperately trying to understand. Prabhupada's talking, and you're just kind of like in this brain block. So Prabhupada said something to me, and I couldn't understand what he was saying, and I was just kind of completely blank. And so Prabhupada repeated it again, and the second time I really, really tried to hear what he was saying. And I still had this brain block. I couldn't understand a word. So then there was a elderly Bengali man, Pranab. He was there, so Prabhupada turned to him. He said, "You tell him." So he started to tell me that this boy that you hit yesterday is here at the temple. He came to see Prabhupada. And then I heard this loud, "Oh, Prabhu, I was so sorry." He had heard that Prabhupada was having darshan. So he came of his own accord to apologize. And he admitted that he was in the wrong to some extent. I had a bit of bother with him the previous day. So he had gone away and then thought about it and came back to apologize to Srila Prabhupada. So then Prabhupada called me and he said, "All right, here's the boy that you were fighting with yesterday." So now there was some basket of fruit underneath Prabhupada's table. Somebody had donated. So he took the basket of fruit, gave it to me, said, "Now go into the other room and apologize." So Prabhupada kind of saved that situation. And, Prabhupada knew that we were all young men, completely inexperienced, especially the Westerners. We had no idea how to live properly, at least according to Vaishnava standards in India. So Prabhupada was, very careful about what devotees he would allow to live in the temple. So anyway, that got cleared up. So now that was like September, October time. And then after touring, Prabhupada came back in November. So we were there in Delhi. I'm sitting outside the door. And Harikesh, he was cooking for Prabhupada, as I said. But he had kind of noted this is the same fellow that got in the fight when Prabhupada was here the previous time. So he was trying to dissuade Srila Prabhupada from letting me take up this servant's duties. But Prabhupada said, "No," he said, "he's here and we need somebody, so let him try." So that was one of the first things I learnt about being in Prabhupada's close proximity, that you had to be very careful how you acted, of course. And at the same time, although Prabhupada had just cause to, and he's a troublemaker, he could have, he got involved in this fighting before. He didn't say anything about it. He never mentioned it again, except when the one time when he called me in his room. But then after that, he never ever mentioned that incident again. That was very typical of Prabhupada, that he would always be willing to give you a chance. If you made a mistake, he knew that I was ignorant of what was really going on in Vrindavan. So he just, basically told me off, and that was the end of it. So now he needed somebody to do his personal service, 2 massages a day and just helping out, cleaning up and all these kinds of things. And Harikesh was not very keen on having me on the party because he'd heard about this incident a couple of months prior. But Prabhupada said, "No, give him a chance." So that was it. The next day, Upendra left. He had shown me to do Prabhupada's massage, which oils to use, where do you begin and end. And apparently after that first day's massage, he told Harikesh he gave me a good massage. So I got, asked, "All right, now Prabhupada's going to be in Delhi for 3 or 4 days. You can do his massage until he leaves for Kurukshetra." So he had a visit from Gozarilal Nanda, and they arranged to meet in Kurukshetra 2 days hence. So in the meantime, then I, was just being allowed to go into Prabhupada's room just to do the massage, or rather on the roof, and then Harikesh would kick me out. And there was, let's see, Upendra was on his last day, so he gave me 2 minutes instruction how to massage Prabhupada. I mean, I never, even touched his feet at that point. And as I say, a lot of devotees, when they got really close proximity to Srila Prabhupada, they would kind of be so nervous that they could hardly communicate or anything. So I I had that kind of apprehension about doing Prabhupada's massage, but at the same time, I knew this is the chance of not a lifetime but many lifetimes that you get to, opportunity to massage a saint like Srila Prabhupada. So I was really happy. And there are a few little incidents that happened, but we had a visit from Gozarlal Nanda. He came the day after I was there, and then they made an arrangement that on December the 1st he would meet Prabhupada in Kurukshetra. So the day before, Gopal Krishna Maharaj was making, he came up to the roof of the building we were staying on. Prabhupada was getting his massage. I was doing it, of course. And Harikesh, I think, was up there. Hansadutta was up there reading the new edition of the Bhagavatam that had just come out. I think the 5th canto or something. So when Gopal Krishna Maharaj came up, he said, I'm making a list of people that are going to Kurukshetra, and then I'm going to hire a couple of cars and we'll go. So when he asked Prabhupada, now who's going, Prabhupada immediately said, well, he can go, meaning me. And Gopal Krishna Maharaj said, Hari, sorry, Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, well, I have to have my massage. So that was it. I got my chance to travel with Prabhupada, not, so things were going nicely, as we say. Anyway, so that was set up. The first evening, just before Upendra left, he called me into Prabhupada's room in the evening, about 9 o'clock. It was like a not completely different atmosphere, but it was, there was a different mood. When Prabhupada was preaching, it was guru, disciple, instructions. It's very strict. But when he was in his rooms, then, he'd relax a bit, and it was very nice just to come in and sit with him. He would talk about different things, sometimes about, the British Raj, or his Guru Maharaj, or like that. So he would be a lot more relaxed, and it was just, amazing Prabhupada in that situation. Most devotees in ISKCON had never come close to Srila Prabhupada. They had no idea what happened, what he was doing during the daytime after the Bhagavatam class and his breakfast, because we all went about doing our duties. So none of us really had a clear idea about what was Prabhupada doing for the rest of the day. So to have that opportunity to be in his room and look, render some personal service, it's like a very rare opportunity. The only time that I touched Prabhupada's feet was in 1975. He had come to Australia to open up the Melbourne Temple and install some deities there. And we all went out to the airport to greet him. Because in those days, the security was very minimal. They made you strip off everything practically. just to go through the security. But in the 70s, things was, a lot looser. So we'd go with like 50 devotees, or in some places like Los Angeles, they had nearly 500 devotees that came to the airport to meet Srila Prabhupada and greet him. So in Delhi anyway, the 3 or 4 of us that were there, before that, when Prabhupada came to Australia to open the Melbourne Temple, established the diocese and everything, and then I've lost my track. Yes, we went out to the airport, as we did, and there's like 50 or 60 of us, and we came, chanting and dancing into the airport. The security people didn't know what was going on, and the volume was so loud that nobody could hear the announcements or anything, and so they were a bit concerned. But I had been given a garland, which I should give to Prabhupada. And Madhvisa Swami, he was our GBC, he had one also. So when Prabhupada got off the plane, then we met him right there as he was, coming off. And Madhvisa went forward. He put a garland around Prabhupada's neck, and then he got down and offered his obeisances right there in the airport, and he touched his head to Prabhupada's feet. So when I saw him do that, I thought, I'm going to do that too. So Prabhupada came out, Madhvisa gave the garland, and then I came forward and put my garland on him, and then I got down and touched his feet with my head. So anyway, that was in May of 1975, and then after that I came here to India. So in November, when he asked me, to fill in, to do his massage, then Upendra had to show me how to do it. So after about 9 o'clock, things shut down. Prabhupada finished his darshan. Prabhupada got up and went into his bedroom, and Upendra got up and followed him, and then he signaled to me, come on, I'll show you. So he had, as I say, given me a 2-minute introduction into massage. And apart from that one time when Prabhupada arrived in Melbourne, I'd never actually touched Prabhupada's body. So now I had to. And the oil massage in the afternoon went well. Prabhupada was apparently happy with that. And then in the evening, I was told to come back at 9 o'clock and do his evening massage. So he had 2 massages. One was at lunch from 11:30 till 1. That was done with mustard oil on his body and sandalwood oil on his head. So you began with his head, spent 15 minutes massaging, and then he would be sat on the mat, and then you go around the back of him and then start massaging his back and shoulders, and then come around, you come around to the side and then massage his arms and his hands and right leg, and then you moved around the left side and did the same there, left arm, left hand, left leg, and then finally you'd end up at his feet, and then it was quite an experience massaging Prabhupada's feet. Touching them was an experience, but actually get in there and start really massaging them, and that was my first realization of what it meant to have lotus feet. Yeah, with Prabhupada's the soul. Yeah, it was really literally like stroking a feather, a petal from a lotus flower. And so where was I? Yes, so we were going to Kurukshetra. So Prabhupada brought me on the party at least just for the few days that he was going to be there and in Vrindavan. And we went by car the next day to Kurukshetra. Nanda was there, he greeted Prabhupada, and then we were taken on a tour of the whole complex that they were building there. So who's been to Kurukshetra? Most of you? No, doesn't look like it. It's only next door. Anyway, Prabhupada was taken by Nandaji all around the Kurukshetra project. They were putting in like sandstone steps all around the Brahma Sarovar. That's the main lake there. They were putting in some areas just for ladies to use. They were starting up an Ayurvedic clinic, so they took Prabhupada to see that. They had a huge Gaushala also, and there's a lot of money and effort that was going into it. So Prabhupada was interested in getting some land there and starting a Varnashram college. So he had spoken previously with Ambarish Prabhu, Alfred Ford, I guess in America. Ambarish had just been initiated shortly before then, and so he came on Prabhupada's invitation to Bombay and then up to Delhi and then to come to Kurukshetra. And if there was some suitable land in Kurukshetra, Prabhupada would try and get that. So Ambarish actually gave him $150,000 to start that project. So he was on the party as well. So we came up to Kurukshetra. Nanda was there. They showed us all around. Then at noontime, Prabhupada went back. There was some kind of a motel that they put us in for the day. So Prabhupada came back for his massage and his lunch. And then after taking a nap in mid-afternoon, then he went with Harikesh, I think, to the Kurukshetra University. I don't know how long that had been established, but they took Prabhupada around, and Prabhupada gave them some of his books to put into the university there. Then that was it. One thing about Gulzarilal Nanda was that when Prabhupada was having his massage, then Nandaji came, and he was sitting on a chair. Prabhupada was sitting on the mat. I was massaging, and they just started chit-chatting. And Prabhupada quoted the first couple of verses from chapter 4 of Bhagavad Gita about Vivasvan, Ikshvaku, like that. So when Prabhupada cited Vivasvan, the sun god, then Nandaji looked at him and he said, "What, you mean there's actually a sun god?" Now, it doesn't sound much, but these people were all followers of Gandhi. They were considered to be the pundits and learned persons guiding the country. And the Bhagavad Gita, of course, was like the standard source of information. But when Prabhupada started, quoting about Vivasvan and how the knowledge comes down in parampara, Nanda just, like he was bewildered that Prabhupada was actually taking it literally. There's a sun god, and there's a Manu and Ikshvaku, and he couldn't figure it out at all. So these people, Nanda was a part of that group around Gandhi, when they got liberation from the British Raj. And, they would talk about Bhagavad Gita, but actually they didn't believe it. They thought, as Gandhi did, that the Gita was just, some kind of philosophical exposition. You weren't supposed to take it for granted, literally, but it was just to help you stimulate your brain substance, and that's as far as they got with it. So Nandaji was part of that initial group, and like with the Gandhi Sevashram, which is he had an ashram. Where is that? Near Dwarka. He had a village called Sevagram. Gandhi did, and these people, like Gozal Nanda and many others, they would go to Dwarka when they started the Congress Party, and they would discuss, tactics for getting rid of the British. So Nandaji, he was one of the prominent figures in that group. So he's there in Kurukshetra. He's gotten $1.5 million given to him by the government through his contacts. He's working to, fix up the whole Kurukshetra area and make it really first class for visitors. And he didn't believe that Krishna was a real person. So much money and so much manpower and so many things, but they didn't even believe the Bhagavad Gita, but they always cited, we're followers of Bhagavad Gita. Gandhi did it, so now Gulzar Nanda was doing it as well. So it's kind of interesting to see their reaction when Prabhupada told them that, no, there is actually a sun god. And so he was a bit bewildered. Prabhupada just kept on preaching to him. And then he told him, he said, now you've retired from politics. He said, why don't you retire completely from family life, take sannyas, and teachings of Bhagavad Gita all around the country. As soon as Prabhupada said, you take sannyas, literally he started shaking in his seat. Just the thought, of having to give up his family and become a sannyasi, his kind of jaw dropped. So Prabhupada saw that, there was a reaction there. So he didn't push the point, he just moved on with the preaching. But that was the situation, and it's still the situation. Prabhupada was preaching Bhagavad Gita as it is, and none of them actually believe that Krishna is a real person. They think it's just some kind of philosophical exposition or something. So Prabhupada noted that. When we left after lunch, we took a detour to Jyotisar. That's about 7 miles further on the road down there. And Prabhupada went there, and this time there was no, groups of people following us around as, we had done when we looked at the facilities. There's quite a group of people that were walking around with Prabhupada and with Nandaji. But when we went to Jyotisar, there was just us, 4 or 5 of us. So we looked around it, and we saw this half Murti, Arjuna and Krishna on the chariots. That's under a big banyan tree. And we were informed that this is the actual spot where Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita. So there were a couple of other small temples there. So after looking, then Prabhupada asked us, what do you think about getting something here? We were all fired up by this time. Harikesh, he said, well, the Brahma Sarovar, that's like Vaikuntha. But he said, Jyotisar, this is Goloka Vrindavan, like that. So Prabhupada smiled, he said, yes. And so he said, now let's try and get some land in Brahma Sarovar, because he wanted Gosaralal Nanda to give us some land. And sorry, what did I just say? Prabhupada wanted Gozaralal Nanda to give us some land. Gozaralal Nanda wanted us to buy it. So there was a devotee called Guru. He was from Punjab, so he was delegated by Prabhupada to negotiate with them, see if we could get the land for free. In the meantime, then Prabhupada told Gopal Krishna Maharaj, now this place in Jyotisar actually is a better place, so let's see if we can get something there as well. So that was it. And in the late afternoon, we drove back here to Delhi. So Prabhupada, he said, they got so much money, so much land, they claim to be following the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, the whole scheme was because Kurukshetra is where Krishna spoke it. So they had set up like a trust for the whole of Kurukshetra, and Nandaji told Prabhupada, we've got this trust, and it was called Manavadharma. Yeah. So as we're driving away to go back to Delhi, Prabhupada mentioned that this. He said that they call it Manavadharma. He said, I call it Pashudharma. He said, all that money spent, all so much effort, to fix up Kurukshetra, but not one deity of Krishna has been installed by him. So, Prabhupada could say it's the usual thing, using Krishna rather than becoming an instrument for Krishna's desire, using Krishna as an element for fulfilling your own desires. So he wasn't very impressed with that. A similar thing happened later on in mid-December in 75 when we actually went to Sevagram, Gandhi's place there. There's a whole thing going on called the Gita Pratishtan. This fellow Bajaj, Ramakrishna Bajaj, the scooters and fans, he was one of the organizers, and Sriman Narayan, he was his brother-in-law actually, because Sriman Narayan had been the first governor of Gujarat, because Gujarat was independent up until about 1962 or 63. They didn't the independent India that had been set up in 1947 or 48. But in 60, I think it was 62 or 63, he became the first chief minister of Gujarat. So they were very friendly with us. They liked Prabhupada a lot. Some of them became life members. So they were concerned that India was becoming very materialistic. And in fact, when Gozaralal Nanda had come to Delhi to fix up the date for going to Kurukshetra, he started to tell Srila Prabhupada that half the country now, the young people, are becoming communists. So as soon as he started trying to bring forth his political thoughts, Prabhupada stopped him. He said, no, don't talk about that now. The reason why was because Indira Gandhi had just declared a state of emergency. MPs imprisoned. Yeah, they were all locked up. That Morarji Desai, he did like a year and a half. She declared a state of emergency and clamped down on everything. So Prabhupada told Gozaralal Nanda, no, don't talk about these things. We should just talk about, what we're going to try and do here with this Manashram College. Anyway, so I drifted off a bit there, but late November then, Prabhupada came to Delhi. He was to meet Gozaralal Nanda there. And then after that one-day trip to Kurukshetra, then he came back to Vrindavan. So I got the opportunity to travel with him to Kurukshetra. And then Harikesh had made an arrangement that when we got back
to Delhi. The next day we were going to Vrindavan for about 10 or 12 days. So he told me that I've arranged for somebody else to give Prabhupada his massage when we get to Delhi. So then there'll be, that'll be it for you. And Gopal Krishna Maharaj, he grabbed me and he told me, we need a new temple president in Calcutta, you're it. So he said, you can travel with Prabhupada back to Vrindavan after the Kurukshetra trip, then I want you to get on the first train to Calcutta, which idea. I just arrived in India about 3 months before, 3 or 4 months before. I didn't know a word of anything except English. And I just thought the whole thing was just crazy, actually. But he was kind of reminding me, all right, when we get to Vrindavan, pack up and go over to Kurukshetra, to Calcutta. Harikesh was pressuring me also. Now, this boy, Pratiputra, he's going to take over doing the massage whilst Prabhupada's here in Vrindavan. After that, he'll go back to Bombay. And this other servant, Nitai Das, he's down there and he'll take up the service again. So at the time, I didn't mind it. I was just in complete ecstasy that I'd actually got to massage Srila Prabhupada. In fact, several months before, Nitai had been in the Vrindavan temple. We used to chit-chat sometimes at breakfast time. So he would tell stories about Srila Prabhupada, and we were all really in ecstasy listening to it. So at the end of one particular morning, finished breakfast, we were just washing up. Nitai was next to me, and I was just thinking, what would it be like to actually massage Srila Prabhupada? Touch his body, not just his feet, but give him a whole body massage. I told Nitai, I said, I can't imagine what you must feel like. I said I could never do that kind of service, where you actually touch Prabhupada's body, because I was a Westerner. I was in the modes of passion and ignorance, as I had demonstrated previously when the interchange I had with that Bengali boy. So I was telling Nitai that I could never do that, actually touch Prabhupada's whole body. And he just laughed. He said, you would if you got the chance. And then I laughed and I said, well, I'll never get the chance, will I? Prabhupada had 5,000 disciples by that time. And then 2 months later, Prabhupada turns up in Delhi. He needs somebody to massage him. And I was the only person there that was available. So I got that, that opportunity. So for me, it was progressively getting in more and more ecstatic. We drove from Delhi to come back to Vrindavan then, after that Kurukshetra trip. And as soon as we arrived, Prabhupada went in, he greeted the deities, he had his Guru Puja, then he gave class, and then he came out the temple and walked off into his quarters. Hansadutta followed him, Harikesh followed him, and I stood outside, because that was the end of my trip. But Pritaputra was there, and Harikesh had told him, you have to take over doing the massage, at least whilst Prabhupada's in Vrindavan. So he told me to explain how to do the massage, as Upendra had told me. Now I was to tell Pritaputra. So we had to, before the massage, we had to go down to Loy Bazaar, because whilst we were in Kurukshetra, Prabhupada, he had this standard where he bathed using a lota and a bucket of hot water or warm water. So he was, Pritaputra. He was in the same situation that I was. He had never actually touched Prabhupada's body or anything. So now he was going to be the new Masul. So he was in ecstasy. I took him down to Loy Bazaar. Prabhupada, that's my track. Prabhupada liked to bathe out of buckets. He would never use a shower or anything like that, but he would always bathe out of a bucket of kind of tepid water, mix hot water with cold temperature. So I had cleaned up after Prabhupada took his bath in Kurukshetra. I didn't look in the buckets, but Prabhupada was in the habit actually of when he'd washed, then he would drop his gamsha in the bucket and then put a towel around himself. So I didn't know that. So when I cleaned up the bathroom after Prabhupada had been in there, I didn't look inside the buckets because I didn't think they were any use. But Prabhupada's gamsha was in there. So when we got back to Delhi, I discovered that I'd left the gamsha in Kurukshetra. So the next day when we got to Vrindavan, the first thing I had to do was tell Prabhupada, how to do the massage, and we had to go down to Loy Bazaar to buy a gamsha to replace the one, that I had left in Kurukshetra. So when we came back, Harikesh saw us arrive. There's a gate just opposite Prabhupada's gate. So we came in through there, and Harikesh came out of Prabhupada's quarters, and he was looking very glum. And he looked at me, and he looked at he looked at Pritaputra, and then he said, I told Prabhupada that you, Pritu, were going to take over doing the massage. So when I told him that, he said, Prabhupada got really angry. And he said, no, he said, why are you disturbing? He said, he was doing a good job. Now you want to change him. Let him stay. So I was like, jumping up and down in ecstasy. Prithu was, a bit disappointed. So that was it. Harry Cash told me, he said, get your suitcase or your clothes and move in. So then I moved into Prabhupada's quarters there. So I was there for about 10 days in Vrindavan. So after a few days, my mood at the beginning, when I was told you got 4 days, was in Delhi. So I was, really, really happy. It was something that you couldn't believe would happen in many lifetimes. So I was just very happy to get the chance to touch Prabhupada. But as we, the stay extended in Vrindavan, I started getting actually quite attached to doing the service. I wasn't thinking like that when we first got there, but after a few days, and especially Prabhupada had given me not just the massage, but all the servants' duties. So I really started getting attached to that. So then I mentioned it to Harikesh and Hansaduta, and they said, no, just go and see Prabhupada, ask him if you can stay on the party. And I was saying, well, I don't really want to disturb Prabhupada, with my, very small amount of service. So Harikesh told me, by this time he had become a lot more friendly. He told me, he said, no, he said, this is directly Prabhupada's service. Yeah, whoever gets to be his servant, you have a big responsibility. So he said, you should ask him if you can. So the next day, I'm giving Prabhupada his massage on the roof of his quarters there in Vrindavan. And I told him, I said, Srila Prabhupada, I've become really attached to doing your service over the last few days. And I was wondering if I'd be able to stay on as your servant. So Prabhupada thought for a moment, then he said, call Harikesh. So Harikesh came up. Prabhupada said, so he wants to stay with me. What do you think? So Harikesh gave me this glowing review. I think Hari Sauri is doing a really good job. You like his massage. I think it would be good to bring him onto the party because Nitai, he comes on for a couple of months, then he goes off somewhere else. He comes on again, off again, not steady. But he said, Harry, Sauri's got no other duties. He can stay with you as your permanent personal servant. So Prabhupada thought for a minute, all right. And actually, before Harry Kesh came up, Prabhupada asked me 2 questions. First thing was, what's your level of education? So I said, well, I went to a British grammar school. So he thought, and then he said, and what was it? He said, can you speak any other languages? So I said, no, I'm not very good at language at all. So he thought about it, and I told him, Gopal Krishna Maharaj wants me to go to Calcutta and be the temple president there, which I don't think is a good idea. So anyway, Prabhupada asked me these 2 questions, and he said, call him. So Harry Kesh came up, and he gave me a really glowing review. I think he's doing really well. He can stay with you, then you won't be disturbed by people like Nitai coming and going. He can stay permanently on the party. So Prabhupada listened, and then he cocked his head and said, okay, you can do it. So that was it. It was now officially on Prabhupada's party. And shortly after that, I happened to bump into Gopal Krishna Maharaj in Prabhupada's quarters there, and he saw me, took me by the arm, and he said, don't forget, even though you're massaging Prabhupada right now, when Prabhupada leaves Vrindavan, you're going to Calcutta. And Harry Kesh heard that whilst he was walking past. So he said, you can't tell Harry Sauri what to do or what not to do. He said, you might be the GBC, but Prabhupada's party is transcendental to any other, group, GBCs or whatever you like. So he was now, kind of boxing in my corner. And so that was it. Prabhupada said, yes, you can stay. So, I was in it. It was unbelievable. I couldn't take it all in one go, but it was something wonderful. And then, so what happened? We were there for 12 days. Then we went back to Delhi. Prabhupada had been interviewing people. He stayed in Delhi for 3 or 4 days. I think 3 days or something. And he had put an advert in the newspaper for people to translate from English into Hindi, because he wanted to get the Indian languages now, all of his books in the Indian languages, and start book distribution as we'd done in the West. So on the last night that we were there in Delhi, we get this knock on Prabhupada's door about 9 o'clock at night. And this fellow comes in, he'd seen the advert, so Prabhupada asked a little bit about him. It turned out he had a PhD in Chaitanya Vaishnavism. So, he was a scholar, and, especially translating Prabhupada's books. So Prabhupada was very careful about that because, as he said, in the Indian public, 99% are all Mayavadis. So he said, it's very important to get my books out in the different languages. So this fellow, spoke Hindi, and Prabhupada wanted to try him out. So when people came, in response to the ads, then Prabhupada would give them a few pages of his books, translate them, and then he would see whether their Hindi was up to standard. Because they had this tendency to bring in these Mayavadi concepts, and Prabhupada had to be really careful, to stop that coming in. And so it was 9 o'clock, and Prabhupada was just about to take rest. This fellow turns up. So he says, well, I want to see more of what you can do, but now it's too late. He said, now it's after 9, I'm going to take my rest. So he said, can you come tomorrow? So he told him, we're going to Bombay, so can you come to Bombay? So he said, yeah. He said, I'm not doing anything. I can come, but I don't have any money. So Prabhupada called in Harikesh, and Hansadutta was already sitting there, and Harikesh came in. Prabhupada asked him, how many tickets to Bombay do we have? So he said, well, there's yours, there's Hansadutta's, there's mine, and there's Hari Sauri's. So I was sat, as you were, just at Prabhupada's side, without even looking at me. Prabhupada just said, so give him his ticket. So that was my ticket. So they handed over my ticket. Harikesh handed it over. And we told him, we'll see you in the morning. So I didn't think anything of it. I thought, okay, you know, the 4 tickets are there. Prabhupada's leaving early in the morning. So naturally he'll use one ticket, but I'll just make my own way down there. So I had a little bit of money. So we went out to the airport the next morning, and you know, they had their tickets. They got on the plane, flew down to Bombay. As soon as we parted company, I went to the ticket counter and I bought myself a ticket to Bombay. And I flew down. I got down there about maybe 1 o'clock. We landed at that time, of course. The airport in Bombay was quite crude, Palam Airport, I think they called it, and you know, it was very small. It only took about 15 minutes by rickshaw to go from the from the airport to where Prabhupada was staying. So I flew down, and I found out where I'd never been to Bombay before. I found out where Prabhupada's quarters were when I came onto, and then I went up to the top to where he was staying. At that time, there was only 6 buildings. There were 6 apartment buildings on Juhu Beach land, and all the apartments, there were like 2 floors. They were all occupied by tenants, so we couldn't get them out, at least not immediately. So Prabhupada had engaged a local builder in putting an extra floor on top of those 6 buildings, and that was used by him and his, you know, followers. So Prabhupada had 1 floor on the top of this building at the back of the land. So I went up the steps, I came into Prabhupada's quarters, and it was quite a small place, but when you went in, there was an open area that was just like for visitors to sit and wait till they could get to see Prabhupada. Then behind that, there was a kitchen. Next to that, there was the bathroom, and then a bedroom for Prabhupada. So when I came up, I came in the front entry there, and it just happened, Prabhupada had just finished getting his massage. He came through the door at the same time that I was coming in. He was coming out from where he took the massage. There was a very small balcony there, and he was going into the bathroom to wash and bathe. So as he came through, I came in, immediately offered my obeisances. Prabhupada looked, he said, "Oh, you're here. All right, very good." And he went off to bathe. So I thought that, you know, the tone of Prabhupada's voice is a slight surprise in it. I was thinking, you know, what's, you know, must be something going on or what? So after Prabhupada went in the bathroom, Nitai came. He'd just done the massage. He said, "Oh, Hari Sauri, you're here. Okay, that's good. I can go back to Vrindavan and work with the school and the deities." That's what he really wanted to do. So I said, okay. And then Harikesh came in and he looked at me and said, "Hari Sauri, what are you doing here?" And then I realized that when he had handed over my ticket to this man, they thought, I mean, they all thought Prabhupada and Hansadutta and Harikesh said, "Too bad you missed out. You know, we got the tickets, we're going. So it's unfortunate, but you won't be able to do that service anymore." So I was the only one that I didn't, you know, pick up on what was going on. I just thought, well, sure, I'll just go and get another ticket. They were all thinking, now your ticket's been given away, you're off the party. So when I arrived there, they were all surprised. "What are you doing here?" But then Prabhupada, you know, he said that's good, you can stay with me. So that was it. That was my little introduction to Prabhupada's personal service. And fortunately, I ended up being with him for about a year and a half. But I got that test, I think it was, from Krishna, you know, the possibility of being on Prabhupada's party and everything. So I thought, you know, my ignorance in not understanding what had happened when Prabhupada had my ticket given to this man, and they all thought, that's it, now you're off the party because there's no ticket for you. So, you know, I was kind of bewildered in one sense that I didn't understand that that's what they were thinking. Yeah, that now you're off the party. So sometimes it's good to be in ignorance. Yeah, because Krishna might have a different plan. So anyway, that was the brief intro to my tenure as Prabhupada's personal servant. And at Gaur Purnima time, then Prabhupada got really sick. I got a very strong kind of indication from Krishna that Prabhupada was changing his Leela. He got really, really sick, and pretty well he didn't do any programs after that. There's this stage of retirement, Nirjana Bhajan. So I actually got a very strong feeling that Prabhupada was going to enter into or change his Leela, you know, and start his Nirjana Bhajan, which means you hand over everything to your disciples, you go into isolation, you concentrate on chanting and, you know, developing your spiritual consciousness. That's Nirjana Bhajan. So around about late February 77, we'd come back to Mayapur, and Prabhupada was very, very weak, quite sick, and I could see something was changing. At the same time, I was feeling within myself also that I'd had this opportunity. Prabhupada was pleased with that service that I'd done, but now, you know, I should go out and try to use what I've learned for preaching Prabhupada's movement. So I had this feeling, Prabhupada's going to retire, I'm also going to be moved on. Exactly how, I couldn't tell at that point. But a couple of days later, Tamal Krishna Maharaj came to be Prabhupada's secretary for the month. And he confided in me that actually he was going to ask Srila Prabhupada if he could stay on Prabhupada's party as his secretary for all the rest of the time that he was going to be with us. In 1968, I've just spent 7 or 8 years just going touring, for book distribution and doing all these development works for Prabhupada. But I never really spent a long time with Prabhupada himself. I was always out in the preaching field. He said, but now I just really feel that I should stay with Prabhupada. If he stays with us for 1 year or 10 years, but this is what I want to do now for the rest of the time that Prabhupada's on the planet. I want to be with him. So I could see Krishna moving things around. I was on my way out. He was on his way in. Tamal Krishna Maharaj was probably the most competent disciple of Prabhupada's, of any of them. He had 130 brahmacharis traveling in 7 Greyhound buses all over the country, selling Prabhupada's books. They were pulling in about $50,000 a month. So now he was asking to be released from all of that so that he could stay and look after Prabhupada personally. So Prabhupada was agreeable. So he put that to the GBC. They came for their meeting. And they also, naturally, if Prabhupada wants it, then that's what should happen. So I left Prabhupada's party in mid-March. And Prabhupada sent me back to Australia as the GBC. No, actually not immediately. He sent me back to Australia. And when I arrived there, I had a letter from Prabhupada to the leaders of the yatras there that Hari Sauri is coming back to Australia, and He's my ad hoc representative. You know, all the rest of the story we know. Prabhupada, you know, stayed there in Mayapur after the festival had finished, Gopurnima, for a few days. Then we got a call, I got a call from Tamal Krishna Maharaj saying that Prabhupada has decided to, well, first of all, he said that he was going to try and get his health back by going to a place in South India, Kodai Canal. There was some man there, Mr. Gupta or something like that, Ghosh. His name was Ghosh. He was an expert masseuse, and he had this technique where, as he was massaging, he would vibrate his hands 40 times a second or something. I mean, I don't know how he worked it out, but that's what he told me. But I saw that when he touched Srila Prabhupada, he actually energized him. He came for about a week to Hyderabad. We'd just gone onto that farm at Medchow, and Prabhupada was trying to set up this Varnashram system on that place there. So, now what was I saying? Oh yes, Dr. Ghosh. He showed me this technique of massaging Srila Prabhupada. You know, you vibrate your hands. He was using hot towels on his joints. And I saw after an hour's massage, Prabhupada was invigorated by it. He really liked it. So after Dr. Ghosh had gone back to Kodai Canal, I tried that. You know, I did an experiment and I tried it out myself on Prabhupada, vibrating my hands. And I think after about an hour, I just couldn't do it anymore. It was really taxing, and I felt drained after doing it. But when Prabhupada stood up to go in the bathroom, after the massage, he practically leapt. I mean, like he just sprang up onto his feet, and he had gone into Srila Prabhupada and was helping him. Only problem was that I couldn't do it every day. I only ended up doing it the one day, because it was just so taxing. I was wiped out after doing it. And Prabhupada never asked me, why don't you do that technique of, Dr. Ghosh? He just, I think he knew I couldn't do it. And so he just, went on with the regular routine of the massage. So how did we get onto this? Anyway, yes, 1977. So I got sent back to Australia. Tamal Krishna Maharaj joined the party as the Prabhupada's main secretary, and then a whole bunch of other devotees were helping as well through 1977. Abhiram Prabhu and his wife. Who else? Prajumna was on the party at that time with his family. So Prabhupada's Leela actually changed during that period. That's what I picked up. And as Tamal Krishna Maharaj told me, that I've spent the last 8 years, touring around selling books, because Pendra was called. He became Prabhupada's servant again. And he stayed on the party all the way until Prabhupada's disappearance. So it was quite eventful, actually, in many ways. Okay, so I'm going to finish at this point. I mean, there's lots to say. I only just scratched. I put a scratch on the scratch. Does anybody have any questions or comments about anything to do with Prabhupada? Yes, Prabhu. Louder.
Working it, like loudly and loudly.
Hare Krishna. So, it was such a wonderful class. You were talking about this timeline of 1977 when the service was given to Tamal Krishna Maharaj and you moved to Australia.
Well, Tamal Krishna Maharaj came on as the permanent secretary, and I swapped off the servant's duties. Went back to Australia in, actually what happened was I left the party on March the 13th. Although I had a residence permit for Australia, I didn't have a passport for it. So it turned out that I had to renew my residence visa before I left the country. So I actually left India at the end of March, and I arrived back in Australia on the 1st of April. So, as I say, Prabhupada had given me this letter to the Australian leaders that Hari Sauri will be my ad hoc representative. The next month I sent Prabhupada a report about the zone, every temple, what men there are, etc., what the budgets are, etc. Prabhupada liked that report very much, so he told Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he heard it, and then he just said, so Hari Sauri can be made the GBC. So he directly put me in as a GBC member. And sorry, what were you going to ask?
I'm just trying to picture out differently. So, where were you, or what was your reaction when you heard about your Prabhupada disappeared from this night?
Whenever.
When your Prabhupada disappeared, you were down. So, where were you, and what was your,
Where was I?
reaction to it? How you felt?
Yeah. I was in New Govardhan, the Australian farm that they have on the Gold Coast. We just purchased that a couple of months before. And so I was up there. We had our first Govardhan Puja at that farm there. Prabhupada was, of course, back in Vrindavan. Well, not exactly. What happened, this is a bit complex, but basically I was sent back in the middle of March. And then later on in the year, Prabhupada went to London for Janmashtami. And then from there he came back to Bombay. And the Bombay temple was almost ready, for completion, maybe 2 months. And then they were going to open it. So Prabhupada had gone there, wait for the building to be completed enough so that we could do the opening. So he was in Bombay. What I had done was that in May, when Prabhupada had called all the GBCs to Vrindavan, he had been in Rishikesh, and then all of a sudden he went back to Vrindavan because he said, I'm going to leave my body very shortly, so I want to be in Vrindavan. So they took him to Vrindavan. And then all the GBCs were called from all around the world for meetings. And so I got that message very late. I came in at the end of May. Most of the GBCs had already left, but there was some important things that were still to go on. So anyway, Prabhupada had a system that he would have a permanent secretary and he would have a visiting GBC secretary, a spot for 1 month to travel with Srila Prabhupada. So whilst I was there in May, I told Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I really want to come back again for a month, so I can come in October. So he's booked me, for October. Then Prabhupada, as I say, went to London, came back, he went to Bombay. So when I came in at the end of September to begin my 1 month with Prabhupada, it was about September 28 or 29. I arrived very early in the morning. It's like 3 o'clock or something. I went to the temple, and Prabhupada was already staying in his apartments there on the top floor. And so I came straight up to see Prabhupada. Tamal Krishna Maharaj took me in, and I was really shocked to see how much Prabhupada's physical body had diminished. He had no strength or anything. He couldn't even roll over in the bed. He had to be moved all the time. So, as he said, I'm practically skin and bone. So still, I came in, Tamal Krishna Maharaj told Prabhupada Hari Sauri's here. So Prabhupada opened his eyes. He said, so how are things in Australia? He said, how are the books selling? So that was always the first question. Whenever he went to visit Prabhupada, he would ask, how are the books? You know, are you selling it? How many are you selling? So I told him it's going very well, we're selling a lot of books. He said, all right, that's very good. Then he closed his eyes. So the rest of the day, I got cleaned up, I took a nap, and then in the afternoon, Prabhupada called for all the senior men to come and see him in his room. So Giriraj, Gopal Krishna, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, myself, Abhiram Prabhu and his wife, Giriraj, who else? Maybe Upendra also. So there's about 8 or 9 of us. We went into Prabhupada's room, and Tamal Krishna told us that he'd been talking with Prabhupada, and there was a question whether Prabhupada should stay on in Bombay, wait for the opening, so we had to vote individually, each one of us, whether we thought he should stay in Bombay or should he go down, up to Vrindavan. So everybody said go back to Vrindavan, except Gopal Krishna Maharaj, because he had, you know, the task of getting the temple in Bombay ready for, you know, the opening. And it was going to be a couple of months before that could happen. But still he thought if Prabhupada leaves Bombay, the work will slow down. If he goes back to Vrindavan, all the devotees in Bombay are just going to walk off the job and go with him. And that's actually what happened. But it was a justified, you know, yay or nay. So he was the only one that thought that Prabhupada should stay in Bombay. Everybody else thought that he should immediately go back to Vrindavan. So I just arrived in the early morning. After that meeting in the evening in Prabhupada's room, then Tamal Krishna Maharaj told me, now you go to Delhi, go ahead, fly to Delhi, get things fixed up in Prabhupada's rooms, because we knew as the layout in Prabhupada's rooms in Vrindavan, there's the one big room, but then the other rooms is quite small. Prabhupada's bedroom was at the back actually, and it was not very big. So we knew that we would have to set Prabhupada up in the big darshan room. So that meant getting a bed and various other things. So when Tamal sent me back up to Delhi, then the first thing we had to do was buy this, you know, a double-sized bed. So at that time, Bhagavata Shraya Prabhu from Australia, he was the TP in Delhi. And they had one gentleman that was coming. He was a friend of the devotees. His wife was wanted to take initiation, so he was just going along with that. But Dawan, his name was Dawan. So he had he was making wooden furniture. So Bhagavat took me to see him first thing in the morning. He said, well, I've got one bed at the moment, this is it. And it was a double bed. So we immediately purchased that, cost 650 rupees. We put it on a carrier and took it to Vrindavan. So that was Prabhupada's last few weeks with us, was on that bed. So I rang up Tamal in the afternoon. I told him everything's ready. It was at the end, you know, if we fly to Delhi, you have to come by vehicle for 2 or 3 hours, and the road is not very good. So better thing would be to come by train. Then you can go from Bombay, you can get down in Mathura, and then we'll bring Prabhupada to Krishna Balaram Mandir. So that's what we did. I flew out. In the meantime, when I told Tamal Krishna Maharaj, I rang him and told him we're ready. Somehow or another, they got like 40 or 50 train tickets, like instantly. And all the devotees came with Prabhupada on the train. So when they arrived in Mathura the next morning, then I was surprised to see how many devotees had traveled. And I was wondering how they managed it, because they only had like a couple of hours notice. And somehow or another they got everybody a ticket. And and came up to Mathura with Prabhupada, Mr. Gupta. We'd met him in January of 77. He was the third in charge of a big area covering all the different railway lines that go into and out of Allahabad, because it was a Kumbh Mela. So everything was booked solid. You couldn't get a seat, what to speak of 50 seats on that, train. Sorry, no, I've gone off track. Anyway, Mr. Gupta, he had arranged for us to get these tickets to go up to Kurukshetra. I mean, the Allahabad Kumbh Mela. So Prabhupada called him, or Tamal called him in September, when we decided to bring Prabhupada back up to Mathura and Vrindavan. They called Mr. Gupta, and within a couple of hours he had all these tickets. He added another carriage onto the train so our devotees could travel with Prabhupada. So that way, then we came up to Mathura. We picked Prabhupada up in the car. When everybody had gotten off, then Brahmananda Maharaj, he got off last, and he was carrying Prabhupada in his arms like a small baby. Prabhupada couldn't move or anything, so we carried him off the train. We put him into the car, and then we drove back to Vrindavan. So that was it. That last 6 weeks began at the beginning of October 2nd, I think. I stayed until October the 30th. That was my ticket. I thought I was coming for 1 month, get that chance to be Prabhupada's secretary. So I had my month, and I was in a bit of a dilemma because I was a new GBC. Prabhupada had kind of, not short-circuited, but what do you call it when you go beyond the... Anyway, I didn't have to get appointed or recommended by the GBC members. Prabhupada just made me one on the spot. So I stayed my month in October, and about a week after I found myself alone with Srila Prabhupada in his room in the evening, and so I asked him, I have this doubt that maybe I should stay with Prabhupada on his party and take up that service as servant again. So I asked him, what would you prefer? Should I stay here or go back? So he said, no, I want you there for now, Australia. So he said, later on we can see about coming back on the party. So that settled my heart. I was in a lot of anxiety whether I should stay or go. And when Prabhupada told me, I want you to be in Australia, then it eased my feelings of regret, leaving the party. So I stayed until the end of October. I came back to Australia. We had this new land that we just bought. So we went up, we had our first Govardhan Puja on that land. And then, of course, a couple of days later, then we heard that Prabhupada had left. So, that's pretty well how it went. I had gone back. Actually, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, the day that I was leaving the party, he told me, why don't you do what Satsvarup Maharaj and Atreya Rishi are going to do? They're going to go back to their zones for 1 month and then come back to be with Prabhupada for 1 month and switch back and forth. So I thought that was a good program. So I went for that. Of course, Prabhupada left 2 weeks later. But that was the idea anyway. Any other questions? Did that answer your question? All right. Sometimes I have a tendency to ramble a little bit, so. Any other questions? I was just reading somewhere where Prabhupada gave a lecture, and so many people were there, and at the end of it, then Prabhupada said, "Any questions?" And nobody said anything, and then Prabhupada got a little agitated. He said, "If you've been listening, there must be questions." So, who's listening? Yes, Prabhu.
So, thank you very much, Prabhu. We see that devotees like you who have given masterpiece, biographical compositions, and writings from Prabhupada. They are so vivid, so clear, as if they happened yesterday, even though they happened like 40 years back. But still, we see that you are able to explain each and every detail, which is like impossible for a common man. If somebody asks me to tell you what happened yesterday, I will just write a few lines because you forget everything. But you remember everything with such great detail. How is this impossible thing possible actually?
This is one of the first myths of ISKCON. Yeah.
So how do you remember so much actually? This is amazing because you...
Well, basically I didn't. What I did was, the first night that I got the chance, when Upendra showed me how to do Prabhupada's massage, it was the first day. He called me in at noon. She showed me how to do the oil massage, and then in the Harikesh kicked me out. And then I was told to come back at 9 o'clock. And there was an evening massage, which up until that point I didn't even know Prabhupada had an evening massage. So he showed me how to do Prabhupada's evening massage. Prabhupada had gone into the bedroom. If the bed was wide enough, the servant could sit next to Prabhupada on the bed as he lay down and do the massage. But that one that we had in Delhi at that time was just one of these like wooden frames, what do you call them? They're not like a modern bed, they're just like a wooden frame with string.
Yes. White spread.
What are they called?
Like in India, we call them charpai.
A what?
Charpai is woven with the coconut fibers.
Yeah, it's like string.
Which has got a wooden frame, yes.
Yeah.
That's what is charpai or banana.
It's like a cot, but there's a special word for it. Anyway, whatever it was. Prabhupada laid down, but it was not wide enough, for Upendra to sit next to him. Upendra had called me, "Now you come and watch how I do it." So I was standing at the door. Upendra was massaging Prabhupada on this cot. And Upendra whispered to me, he said, "The first time I did this massage, Prabhupada fell asleep." So I stopped. I thought, Prabhupada's asleep now. He came out of the darkness. "Oh, you were finished?" And he said, so I had to go back and keep on going until Prabhupada told me that I can leave. So that evening massage, which I thought the first time was the easiest part of the day's service, turned out to be the most difficult because everybody was asleep. If Prabhupada went to sleep, that might also, so you're the only one that's awake, so you had to fight to keep your brain active. Otherwise, massaging up and down Prabhupada's legs, and you start getting the nods and stop, and then suddenly, you snap back again, and you wouldn't really know whether you'd been asleep for 5 minutes or 15. And Prabhupada's still snoozing there. Anyway, the first night Upendra showed me, it was like 10 minutes, and Prabhupada just, and that was the signal. So we left. So when I left Prabhupada's quarters, at the end of the road there was a small, like these hole-in-the-wall, shops, little tiny shop, and this guy was selling clean notebooks. So it was called the New Janitor Bookstore. So I went there straight after coming out of Prabhupada's quarters, and I bought a blank notebook. And I was thinking if, this kind of opportunity to personally massage and serve Prabhupada, it could take lifetimes to get to that point. So whatever happens, I'm going to write it down, so that in 10 or 20 years, I can read that and remember what it was like being with Prabhupada. So that was the first thing that, it was, I guess, an inspiration from Krishna. I ran down the steps, went over to the bookstall, I bought a blank notebook, and I started writing a little bit every day, whatever was happening. So I never actually had written before. I'd never kept a diary before, but somehow or another I got that inspiration. So the written diary is like in note form. Then there was all the recordings on, we had this big reel-to-reel cassette player. No, it wasn't a cassette. It was a big reel-to-reel recorder. So a lot of what Prabhupada was saying in the daytime was, we didn't record it, but when people came to meet with Prabhupada, or when we were on the morning walk, or Prabhupada was giving class, all of that was being recorded. So that was like, that in itself was like another diary, electronic diary. And then apart from that, I got all the letters, a copy of all the letters that had been written to Prabhupada during that period. I fished them out the archives. They were very helpful. And then finally, the other source material that I had was photos. I just collected as many photos as I could. And so with those 4 different elements, handwritten diary, electronic diary, the photos, and then Prabhupada's correspondence, I was able to present what was happening on any given day way. Because one of the things is that you can read, transcripts of Prabhupada's discussions with different people, but in the middle of all of that, very often somebody else would come in and Prabhupada would go off topic about something else, and it's very difficult to kind of read a straight transcript because you don't really have in your mind an image of what it was like. You hear these words, but it's kind of difficult to put it together in a sensible way. So because I was there, I was able to provide the context, for what was happening. Somebody would say something, if you played it back on the recorder, it might not make much sense, but if, let's say it was something happened, and then 2 or 3 days later, if somebody else heard that conversation, they wouldn't really know everything what it was about. But for me, because I was there and I'd written it down, I'd done the recording, so I still had like the context of that conversation. I knew what Prabhupada was referring to, so I was able to, write that down. So that's basically the method. The only problem that I have with it is that I'm not a good writer, and I really struggle sometimes with what they call writer's block. I have 5 volumes of that diary covering 1 year that have been printed. I've still got 2 more to do.
Wow.
But the last volume came out in like 2004. So I've gone, what's that, 14 years? 15 years. So I actually haven't worked on that for like the last 15 years. So I'm always kind of in anxiety about getting that done. But I've always allowed my materialistic mind to dictate, no, don't sit down and write, do something else. That's the way it is. So let's see. I have a second diary that I kept from the month of October. So that begins. The difference is that the first diaries, I was Prabhupada's servant. The last, 1 month that I wrote down, 7, I was one of Prabhupada's secretaries at that time. So anyway, somehow or another we got something down. But the fact is that we're in a situation, it's very unique in our whole parampara, that we're living in an age where every second can be recorded. You can get thousands of photographs. There's no excuse, for not knowing things in Krishna consciousness. It's all there. Prabhupada's 80 or 100 books. We've got all the films, we've got all the letters. I mean, we have access to a pure devotee that's never occurred like this before in history. Yeah, Bhaktisiddhanta to start this kind of, touring. He had ambitions to go to the West himself. He started, the process of trying to spread Krishna consciousness, and Prabhupada was following in his footsteps. But, the sheer volume of material that he's left us, Prabhupada left us, there's no excuse for anybody for not knowing things. It's right there in your face. So we're in a unique situation. We're the first generation, that has access to all the things that the Acharya has been doing, and when he did it, and how he did it, and who did he do it with. That's all there, all that material is there, but you won't find that with any other Acharyas, because they were writing all the philosophical works, which Prabhupada was doing as well. But this is a unique situation we're all in, that we have this opportunity to get access to a pure devotee in a way that's never been done before. If we don't do that, we're condemned, we're going to hell. There's I have no illusions about that. This is our responsibility now to protect Prabhupada's heritage, as you're doing. You're going out selling Prabhupada's books. That's, the number one activity that Prabhupada gave us. So.
Thank you so much.
Right. What time is it?
It's almost 10. More than 10.
10 o'clock. Shall we stop or shall we go on?
Yeah, we can.
Maybe another little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Couple of questions, two more
sure,
questions. Now I was going to say something there. Anyway, Krishna gave us access to Prabhupada in a way that's never been done before. All these electronic media and so many other things. So, we're very, very fortunate, and we should make sure that we take advantage of it as much as possible and spread it as far and as wide as possible so that it doesn't disappear. If you read about